Lars, shall we make these greetings with each other?
Yes, Bermit. Let's do that because we cannot be in the same room. We cannot be together physically. So I suggest that you take your hands and you put them up here like this, and it's not the same, but it's almost like we touch the neighbor, right? So thank you for this suggestion, Bermit. That's wonderful. Thank you. Okay. A very warm welcome to everyone, and especially to our three guests, the PD enthusiasts and experts. So I'm very happy we could make this informal fireside chat happen. So thanks also UN Women and UNDP for organizing it. It's very good. A very warm welcome to Monique Sternin, the co-founder of the Positive Deviance Initiative. I'm very, very pleased that you could make it. Also, a very warm welcome to Maha Abusamra from Palestine, from UNDP Somalia. And also a very warm welcome to you, Mark. Most of you know Mark already because you've been part of the team working with ALPD, as we call it, Adaptive Leadership and PD in Kyrgyzstan for the last couple of months, but a very warm welcome to you as well. Let me begin by asking you, Monique, how did you get involved with Positive Deviance? Could you briefly say a little bit about that?
Okay, good morning or more. Good evening to everyone. I just would like to introduce myself first. I'm Jerry's Sternin's wife, and he died about more than 10 years ago, but he still inspires us. I've been introduced to Positive Deviance about a long time ago, over 30 years ago, through a book that was published in 1990 called Positive Deviance in Childhood Malnutrition. My husband and I just grabbed this concept. What really caught our imagination and mind and heart in Positive Deviance is that solution to very complex problem already exists. And if they exist already, they are sustainable by definition. Before we come, and UN agencies, all us included, before we come to intervene, it worked. And it worked, it's been measured. And I'm sure people here can smile and say that they are experiencing in their current projects, or they have experiences before.
To ask you, Maha, what does Positive Deviance have to offer to the world, to social change, and so on?
It's a pleasure to be with you today. I'm from Palestine. Currently, I'm working with UNDP in Somalia and Mogadishu as a program specialist, gender equality and women empowerment. When we talk about positive deviance, it's very important when you apply it to be a good listener. You need to listen to everything from your stakeholder and the community, despite if you agree or you don't agree. Then you can ask questions to discover what you want to do. We know that we have a problem. For example, with the UN Women, it was about the early marriage problem. We ask them a question, we push them, but they are the expert. They decide what they want. Positive deviance approach, it can be applied at all levels, at individual, in your house, in your neighborhood, at your institutional, even at the national level.
I would like to hear a little bit from you, Mark, because you fell in love with Positive Deviance many years ago. Why this love affair? Why this passion for the approach? What does it take as a leader to actually enable a Positive Deviance process?
Hello, everybody. It's very nice to see you. I got sick and tired of failing. And I was in a role where I helped to plan and lead large-scale innovations in big organizations, and they didn't work. We would have a splendid plan, and we would roll it out, and we would do all the normal things. And all of a sudden, people didn't like it, and they wouldn't do it. People would sit around the table at the end of the day and say, why don't people do what I want them to do? We all of a sudden said, well, maybe we need to figure out what they want to do and need to understand what they are doing that helps some of them be successful in ways that others aren't. And so it was out of frustration and out of a self-critique that I tried to figure out, was there anything that I could do differently? a leader has to be able to say, I do this, but I'm not sure I know the answer. So there's a kind of humility that the leader has to have for her to go to others and say, help me figure this out. And it's creating those conditions and supporting those conditions and making sure that people at perhaps lower levels in the organization, that when they start to work and speak, that they're protected.
A question for you, Monique. Often you say that we need to learn to become non-experts. What does that mean?
Yes, I usually introduce myself as an expert at being a non-expert. Well, that's been my experience for 30 years working in many different fields that I know nothing about, and nutrition was one of them.
I would actually like to ask you, Maha, as a facilitator of a PD process, what is the most important thing you need to do? What are the skills required?
Terminology. If you go to the community, say, I will introduce PD and let's do, they will not listen. They will.
Okay.
You just put the elephant in the room. Don't use this terminology. Just take it easy and simple. For example, if I talked about CEDAW in my country, everybody will attack me from the justice sector. But I can discuss the disaggregation, every single element in the agreement without mentioning CEDAW, and they just smooth and easy, they accept it. So we need to be careful about the terminology.
Okay.
To be a good listener, to listen well, even if you don't like, but you need to listen well and to know when to ask the question so you can push them in a positive way. You need to learn to put dots as much as you can, and then to link these dots together in harmonized way. Let them choose, because if they decided, then they will act, and will be sustainable.
So what does that actually mean, Mark, to act your way into a new way of thinking? Could you say a little bit about that?
Well, I think that in Kyrgyzstan, you colleagues are doing exactly that. You're asking so many questions of each other and of the communities that you visited. Your curiosity becomes spreading, becomes infectious, and people say, oh, look, there's that interesting person from UN Woman. We like her. She asks interesting questions. Now I'm going to start asking questions. You have a mental model of curiosity, of inquiry.
Okay, I think it would be good to hear a little bit from UN colleagues in Kyrgyzstan. Some of you have worked with families and happy families and integrating the positive deviance methodology with the GALS. GALS is Gender Action Learning System method. Just say for a few minutes a little bit about what you are discovering right now with the families you work with.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity, Laura. Regarding our experience in or with these families, exactly as Laura's mentioned, it's a time-consuming process. It definitely also takes quite a lot of effort. We try to put ourselves in their shoes. We try to take ourselves to the level of their communities, literally. If we start looking at all those people who deviate from others, and if we start asking the community, do you have such positive deviants? A lot of people would answer, no, we don't have any positive deviants. Everyone is the same, everyone is equal. Or even if we ask questions like, are you happy? A lot of people would refrain from answering that because for whatever reasons. So when we, as part of our team, started harmonizing, agreeing on the list of criteria and factors for a happy woman and a happy man, we really hit the nerve, we really hit that bone, because those surveys really showed the true dynamic. Because prior to the project, when we asked them, are you happy? Everyone, there was a 100% success rate. They seemed to all be happy. However, when we started analyzing them by their behavioral trends, they helped us draft 6 main components: health, food, upbringing or child raising, housekeeping, economic opportunities, and taking care of oneself. Looking at all those criteria and characteristics, they were identical between men and women. The only difference, we noticed that men and husbands like women who take care of themselves, who looked nice. Some of them lamented that unfortunately not all women, not all of their wives could free themselves of all the house chores. The idea of rethinking the distribution of household duties unfortunately was never really considered properly. Still, there is this rigid mindset that it's a woman who has to take care of all the house chores, and unfortunately that results in women simply not having enough time to actually look the way their husbands wanted them to look, not having enough time to, perhaps getting enough medical attention, basically being deprived of their ability to participate in their communities' lives or in the economic revenue generating opportunities. When we actually started questioning those people, are you happy? You know what? There was silence in the room. Less than 20% of people who originally responded that they were happy eventually stated that they were happy. The discrepancy, the difference was 70 to 80%. So those were our first step of immersing ourselves and immersing them into the whole system of identifying positive deviance. And based on that, we started asking them, do you have in your village people who would actually meet these criteria and characteristics of positive deviance? And exactly as Maha, Mark, and Lars mentioned, it's very difficult, and there shouldn't be a 100% match between that pre-test and post-test. That idea guided us to believe that some people would eventually match against these and these and these criteria, and there would be those that would match against other criteria. We wanted to facilitate the recognition of women's major role in maintaining their household, in alleviating that unfair burden that was put on their shoulders. Men and women realized that they had to redistribute, reallocate their house chores and duties. So when together with Lars, we started drafting all those measurement tools. And there, at the level of self-assessment, we had them assess the accomplishment rate. And that was quite difficult because that required a lot of being honest with themselves. So as recently as yesterday, we realized that those measurement tools to require that people are as truthful, as honest to themselves, with themselves, as they are or should be with the people who surround them. And that was actually quite difficult to achieve. It's always easy to fall victim to that fallacy of quantitative indicators. So that was the first thing that I wanted to draw attention to. The other thing that I believe is relevant and important is that all those questions and issues regarding the identification of PDs, well, that's something that we've worked on in the course of the adaptation and implementation of the of GAL's gender assessment system. And when we only started familiarizing ourselves with it, we said that GALS and ALPD should be done together. They should be integrated there because they're mutually complementary. So when we were identifying all those happy men and women, as we talked to our beneficiaries, we looked at the so-called tree of a happy family. So what is actually happening in that tree of a happy family model? And that model consists of 6 steps. And the first step is dreaming and relationship within the family, analysis of the current situation. The roots include our third step, and there we considered obligations of every individual member of a household or a family. The roots of the analysis demonstrated the findings that indicated who within family has the most duties and how much time is allocated and spent on those duties. And dependent on on that volume of time, people actually had to think over and redistribute all those family duties. Some of these things are just inadmissible and they're just unacceptable as part of the local mindset or culture. So my husband could probably approach me and say, hey, Gulmira, my dear honey, why don't I take some of your duties and you may actually spend that time, that freed up time, on something that you find important for yourself. So all these intricacies, all these subtleties, they may seem, not important enough or not crucial enough, but they are. They are.
Yeah.
Following that, during subsequent meetings, we drafted all those measurements. The participants, our beneficiaries, sent us some of the candidates for PDs. Well, one of the village members actually suggested that we unite all the identified PDs. It was the village residents who initiated this idea, setting up some kind of a PD club, if you will, so that later on, this membership in that club be expanded, and this branch of PDs be passed on, this torch of PDs, if you will, be passed on to other prospective PDs. That was really a learning experience for us. But again, let me remind you by saying that it was a time-consuming and energy-requiring process. We were lucky that Mark mentioned, yes, it's good to ask a lot of questions. It's contagious, but sometimes people get tuned out when too many questions are asked. So we had to keep that in mind.
So I have a question here. In multi-ethnic villages, PD, we were not able to identify together with the participants. Maybe when there are many ethnic groups living together in one community, so maybe it's a bit problematic to identify PD simply because all ethnic groups, they have their own traditional, customs. What do you think about it, about this conclusion that we made, that in multi-ethnic communities, it may be a bit problematic?
It happens a lot that you live in a very diverse communities. So you absolutely right that it's very difficult, particularly on those issues, gender issues, to bring people all together. So we usually do a process of working within each ethnic group, if you will, or tribe, particular group of stakeholders by themselves. In nutrition, you would have the grandmothers talking together. You would have the older siblings, caregivers. We always try to first have conversation with each group and then bringing them together at the end because they all live in the same community.
I very much agree, Monique. We've seen that also in other projects. The Roma project with the kids, we needed to talk separately with the kids and the teachers and the parents and so on, because otherwise we could not build trust and people would not share their experiences. So yeah, you're totally right. Anara, would you like to give the floor to your colleagues, or please? Nice to see you.
I think it would be much fair if they will share their experience. With this, I would like to give the floor first to our partner, Roza Initiative Foundations, and this will be Janibek, I guess. Yes, Janibek?
So I'm very happy to welcome all of you here. We're very happy to see you. Once again, let me stress that this meeting, it was right in the process of implementation. We're on the field trip. We're traveling right now. We're using our methodology. We're just beginning the implementation of this methodology in practice. We had some preparation period, so I cannot boast of a lot of success right now, but I will share things about what's happening, about the process, okay? We're utilizing this methodology in conducting an assessment to identify positive deviance and cases of positive practices for involving women and girls, including those affected by migration, in community development and peace building processes. We are a country that we have a lot of labor migrants. We have about 1 million people who are in migration outside of Kyrgyzstan. That is a very huge number. And we're currently working with our colleagues in UN Women and other partners. We're working with communities, and we should bear in mind that every second family, or every family almost, has at least one man or one woman who migrated to other countries to earn money. And at the same time, in communities, we have some certain gender norms. Women who come back from migration, they do not participate very often in public or social life or community life. They're not engaged. We realize that we should not impose our point of view on respondents. We should be neutral, unbiased. Also, we decided not to mix men and women. Men said, please don't tell women what we talked about. Please do not record our conversation. That means they can be more open if women are not present. When we identified PD, we could clearly understand the criteria that there should be this practice that would be spreading inside of communities or in other communities. As Ms. Monique told us in the very beginning, we're not experts. Clearly, every community has its norms, its mentalities, economic conditions. So communities are experts by themselves. First of all, we would interview women. We invited such people as a woman who was in migration, a parliamentarian, a local activist, women who are like housewives at home, school principals, school directors, local activists. And the same was true for men, the same composition. So we invited these groups to discuss the problem from various perspectives And in the very beginning, we would identify the positive practice in the female group, in the women's group, and then we were asking men what they think about it. If this is recognized by men and both groups recognize it, that means this practice is a good thing. We also realized they're quite emotional. So we had to be calm because sometimes a man, well, at some point, the man was saying, "You're asking stupid questions. You're asking foolish questions. Your questions are weird. They're foolish." And we realized it's a good thing because he's being open, he's being emotional about it. You could see that we had focus group discussions and we were talking with people one-on-one, face-to-face in the midst of the project. We already had some experience working with the community. They knew us already, so we had they had some confidence in us. This helped us identify the actual real conflicts in the village and to understand who is a mediator. Our challenge is lack of time, and not all respondents were ready to answer our questions. We don't have any questions. Please wish us good luck because right now we're in the process. We're traveling and working.
It's wonderful to have these live cases. You are in the field right now, so that's also wonderful. So thank you.
And Asil is coming here.
Всем добрый день.
The day after tomorrow, we'll have our first mission to communities and we'll start the process. So we're very young in this process. Now, this picture here, it is not accidental because we believe it speaks volumes, speaks a lot about the methodology of PD. So like a diamond on the lots of rocks, right? But there is one diamond right there. Despite the fact that this is a very difficult path, lots of pebbles and stones on the way, but there is always one diamond among that pile of rocks. It needs to be found, and that's a value for that community. And every cloud has a silver lining. Now, speaking of the positive deviants, these people, they're able to find out of the box way, unconventional ways that enable them to be more successful. Every single person, they're the masters of their own life and path, and they have a choice. They can either stay in the same place where they are, or they can find some other ways where they would be free and where the water is clean and so on. So people are not waiting for assistance from outside like a ready-made recipe. We really like the expression, go slowly. The slower you go, the more successful you are. Very often we hurry up, but very often we make mistakes because we miss a lot of important things along the way. There are some nuances that are very meaningful. It's an organic, dynamic movement. There is always adaptation and change. It's very individuated. We're family-oriented, we're community-oriented. And this development process goes bottom up. It's not that we come there and we bring some, ready-made formulas like a happiness formula. People develop it themselves. So what are some of the apprehensions, if you will, when we apply this methodology in our project? First of all, this is a very limited time. Regrettably, since this is our first experience, all of these apprehensions that we're discussing, they're interrelated. So in the evenings, we'll be getting together, having a debrief, and we'll be helping each other how to make our work better. And the most important question is, how can we be on time? How can we be and happy and on time?
Thank you so much, Giselle. Wonderful. But I would like you just for a minute to sit with yourself and think about what are you curious to learn more about? What are the questions that comes to your mind that you have not been asking?
This is question to presentation of Janibek. From their experience, they have divided men and women, yes, separate groups. Is it okay to do that? What was the conclusion from women's group?
Well, it's a very good question, and I will tell you why we would separate them and how that helps us. We wanted to see whether or not men support the positive practice done by women and whether or not they think it's a positive practice. Is there recognition? Not really approval, but recognition.
And I very much agree. It's very important that people pick both the problems they want to work on, and there is kind of an agreement. Also, when it comes to the positive behaviors, the behaviors we want to learn from, they need to be picked and selected by the communities. So yes to that.
I have a question.
Please, Monique.
About the PD Club. I'm very intrigued.
Yeah, that's nice.
This wonderful project. I think it's a great innovation there. I'm just curious to know what they're doing.
I like the way you have framed it as a club also. I think it's beautiful.
Indeed, as Gomira explained, it wasn't just one village, but there were a lot of villages where people, local residents, would actually initiate those ideas, pitch candidates for who they believed would make the base PDs. They've mentioned that men should definitely be involved because without the involvement of men, everything we would talk about alleviating the burden of women would go in vain. Also, there was a conversation regarding mothers-in-law. We needed to select PDs among mothers-in-laws because those mothers-in-laws who were PDs, their families were happier. They could make some kind of advisory on how to set that harmonious type of environment. So that is men's clubs, mothers-in-laws, and yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's so nice with the club because a club is something you want to join. It's a very positive. That's great. Thanks for sharing.
Now, I'm not sure if all of my colleagues and counterparts share this, but it's really not a question, but rather than a reflection. We've noticed that our culture, local Kyrgyz culture, whenever people are asked about problems, people are so open. Kyrgyz people are so transparent in that regard. You know, they are willing to share, especially when it comes to problems. However, when it comes to some kind of positive solutions, people really become silent, you know. So I guess it's a sign of their lack of experience in self-awareness, in questioning themselves. And I have this perception that this is something that we need to instill into our culture. This is still something that we have to learn, the skill of actually going ahead and trying to find a constructive, positive solution. Because oftentimes, unfortunately, people go for radical solutions, for emotion-based solutions. So things that Gulmira mentioned and my other colleagues, Janabek and Desal mentioned, a question for them. Did you have that feeling too? Like people weren't as, they were so open regarding problems, but weren't as quick to find solutions. Adnara, if I may, I will go ahead and answer your question. You are correct in your observation. Indeed, in certain communities, we did notice that trend. This is why when we talked about problems, we tried to identify the topic of that particular problem. We didn't want those people to hijack the whole conversation with, you know, problems that are only of concern to them. Again, regarding terminology, we didn't call them PDs, you know, because we didn't want to burden them with the whole burden of trying to understand what deviant means. So we call them people who can find non-standard solutions or unique solutions. But yes, you're right. We did observe that kind of trend as well.
I see these challenges of discovering the solutions and being aware of the small things in all positive deviance related projects. And sometimes we say that the genius lies in the banalities or in the simple things. The devil lies in the details. It's another way of thinking because we think about and we work with the assets and the things that are already happening, and we are not that used to it. But I would like just to hear a thought or two from you, Monique, Maha, and Mark. What have you heard? And if you have a reflection you would like to share.
I will start very quickly.
Please.
It was brilliant. And I wish you would be, I hope we recorded this because you're teaching us how to do positive deviance in your own environment. And it's so wonderful. And I'm sitting here and feeling so privileged to be listening to your conversation, to the question and to some of your struggle, but also you share your successes, and I can feel your pride, and I can tell you that I feel the same way. What people need to hear is your voices, your struggle and your triumph in using this particular approach. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
One thing I think that unites our conversation and our interaction today is the idea of a mindset or a frame of mind, not just being a non-expert, being curious, but the ability to look for surprise, to appreciate how people are working to make their lives better and how our role in a very small way might be to be on their journey with them in their community. As outsiders, we have a particular privilege and a particular position to be able to be of use. So I hear you colleagues being servants to the community, and I hear your humble mindset being a real gift to those with whom you work.
Thank you so much for sharing the experience. Even though we have different countries, different contexts, but we have some similarities. And one of the key messages I want just to confirm, if you want to do a transformational change, start with yourself. Because if I looked at myself 5 years ago, how I used to work and the way I'm working now, it's completely different. It's not about right or wrong, but it's a different, which is more change and more impact. Thank you so much.
Dear colleagues, it was excellent to hear from you, Monique, Mark, Maha, your experiences. But I very much agree with you, Monique, to hear from this live work going on right now and having this conversation about do's and don'ts and getting advice and sharing and so on is so important. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the Fireside chat. I'm wishing you all a very nice weekend. Let us give each other an applause. Thank you and goodbye. See you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice weekend.
Goodbye.
Bye.